I have played every single Persona game that you can feasibly play across the 30-year history of the series being around. Persona is one of the most important JRPG series to date, selling upwards of 30 million total copies as of recording this video. And since I'm a teeny tiny Persona fan, as you might be able to tell, I wanted to take a trip down memory lane and revisit all of the games and bring you along for the journey. This story begins all the way back in 1996, with the game that started it all, Revelations Persona. As you might have noticed, this is the only game I don't have here with me in person because this shit is worth more than a car payment. So let's just do this real quick. Give me 1 second, guys. There we go, perfect. So Revelations Persona, otherwise known as Megami Ibunroku Persona in Japan, is of course the first game in the series. And it very well could have been the last one we saw because the localization was fucking awful. Revelations is the localized version of Persona 1, which was released on December 14th, 1996. The localization of this game, in my opinion anyway, is probably the worst localization ever made. It's missing an entire route of the game, the race and names of characters were changed, and it has many racist remarks sprinkled throughout, so that's just great. Surprisingly, the game was fairly well received, which opened the door for Persona to continue releasing outside of Japan going forward. Development of the game began in 1994, shortly after Shin Megami Tensei If was released, which was basically the elder sibling to Persona. SMT If revolved around the inner struggles of young adults in a high school setting, which was well received with the Japanese audience, so they went on to create a sub-series based on that specific setting. Without SMT If, there is no Persona. That is why almost every Persona game thus far has revolved around high school students. It's a part of the series' identity. The reason the title was Megami Ibunroku Persona in Japan was to signal to fans that it was a sub-series of the mainline Shin Megami Tensei franchise, which was Atlus's bread and butter during this time. Once it became large enough to be recognized as its own thing, they dropped the subtitle altogether, which was pretty smart. The story of Persona 1 revolves around students from St. Hermelin High School that, as you'd expect, find themselves in bizarre situations. It all kicks off with the main cast play the Persona game, not to be confused with the Persona game we are currently playing and watching. It's a game that supposedly shows what your future has in store for you, which I guess wasn't too far from the truth. A mysterious girl appears, the team eventually awakens their personas, and they go on a journey of self-discovery. The game has a couple routes you can go down, but the main cast of the SEBEC route include the reserved, silent protagonist Naoya Todo, the rich, pretentious Kei Nanjo, the upbeat, hot-headed Masao Inaba, and the ideal, perfect Maki Sonomura. Maki is the main focus of the SEBEC route, but explaining that whole storyline would make this into a Persona 1 story analysis, and this is supposed to be spoiler-free, so let's just leave it there for now. The secondary route is the Snow Queen quest, which once again has Naoya, but then there is the brash, straightforward Yukino Mayuzumi and absent-minded Yuka Ayase. This is the only Persona game to date to have two separate routes that are fully canon to the story. And not only that, it's only one of two games to have optional party members, which gives the game some more replay value. I always go with my girl Ellie though. I love my girl Ellie, shout out Ellie! Oh yeah, I also should mention that this game does not have the social link or calendar system mechanics. These mechanics were introduced in Persona 3, but we'll talk more about that mechanic itself once we get there. Really, the gameplay of the older Persona games is different in a lot of ways compared to the newer ones most people are familiar with. It's still turn-based, but it was different in aspects like the grid system and dungeon crawling. Persona 1 was the first and only first-person dungeon crawler in the series, whereas the rest of the games would swap to a third-person point of view. This makes the game very unique in this regard, and as I said in my Persona 1 review, I think the gameplay is pretty solid. It's a little dated in some ways for sure, but for the first entry to the series, not bad at all, which we can give thanks to the SMT series for since they learned a lot from SMT before getting to Persona. The game sold very well in Japan, and to this day it's still one of the fan favorites in the region, beating out even Persona 5 in a lot of polls, and it was the best-selling game for a while. It sold decently well overseas as well, so despite the bad localization, it worked out in the end, I suppose. Except it didn't end that well because the sequel was not localized whatsoever. Awesome! After the success of Persona 1, Atlus quickly got to work on the sequel, Persona 2 Innocent Sin, which evolved on the game in many ways. The dungeons were more intricate, characters more fleshed out, basically all the stuff people loved from the previous game but improved upon. Due to certain circumstances, the game was never localized outside of Japan, since there was a lot of Japanese culture involved. Oh yeah, Nazis and Hitler made an appearance, that probably played a role in it too. The story of Innocent Sin is more detached from Persona 1, focusing on a new setting and cast of characters. Interesting to note is that to this day, Persona 2 is the only mainline game in the series to give the protagonists canon names. Innocent Sin's protagonist is Tatsuya Suwo, a reserved pretty boy from Seven Sisters High School. Then you've got Lisa Silverman, an upbeat gal with a crush on Tatsuya, Yukino Mayuzumi, who is the only major character from Persona 1 to make an appearance, Akichi Mishina, a wannabe rock star, and finally, Maya Amano, an optimistic journalist who's always looking for the next big scoop. I think the cast of Persona 2 is better than Persona 1's in virtually every way, and I say this as someone who did enjoy Persona 1's cast a good amount. The characters were given so much more time to shine, and they're just so much more fleshed out. And for a JRPG, that's what you want to see, baby, yeah! The story was a lot different from Persona 1 as well. Every mainline game focuses on a different theme. In Persona 1, some of the themes were jealousy and apathy, but Persona 2 focuses on sin, regret, and rumors. The story revolves around rumors and how they can affect the people around them. In an interview with Kazuma Kaneko, the art director for the Persona series, he said this in response to what sin and rumors have to do with the story. My definition of rumor is when a person makes a judgment based on their own preconceptions and prejudices, and then recklessly disseminates that to the wider world. When that stuff circulates, it could eventually become a sin. In the world of Persona 2, when a rumor becomes well known enough, it becomes reality. The reason this works so well is because it basically means they can do whatever they want with the story and it'll make sense, like the Nazis randomly appearing out of nowhere. There are actual reasons for all of these choices and rumors though, so it's not like it's poorly written, but it's certainly more all over the place in comparison to something like Persona 1 or even the games that came after. Now, in regards to the gameplay, let's just say I had very intense feelings on this aspect of the game. Now granted, that review I made was on the PSP version, which we will get to, small spoiler. It's basically the same in this PS1 version. The summary of that near mental breakdown was that every step forward the game took, it took 2 or 3 steps backwards. The dungeon crawling is more fun, but the battles themselves are not. The game is easier than P1, battles take longer, at least it feels that way, and even the dungeons, which I just said are better, are annoying in a lot of ways still. While the story is great, the gameplay makes it hard to want to experience it because it is just bad. In my opinion, of course. I do want to be fair though, so let's talk about some of the innovations this game made. This game introduced the fusion spell mechanic, which are persona skills you can use in conjunction with other members of your party. Using certain skill combinations will unlock these fusion spells for you to use. So as an example, if you use a fire spell and straight slash together, you'll get the flame cut EX skill. It's actually a really good system, but since the game is so easy, it's hard to use them to their full potential. Still very cool though. It's weird because I do think that on paper the combat is way better than Persona 1, but for some reason I just can't gel with it. It's a great game with a lot going for it, so I don't want to seem like I'm being too harsh or biased against it, but let's just say I don't have any plans to replay it anytime soon. In comparison to Persona 1, the game didn't sell quite as well, especially since it wasn't localized. Persona 1 sold around 391,556 units in its first year in Japan, whereas Innocent Sin sold about 274,798 copies. This doesn't mean it performed badly though, more so that Persona 1 performed that well. It took roughly 20 years for the first year sales of Persona 1 to be beaten, which is insane. Of course, after Innocent Sin's respectable reception and sales numbers, they quickly got to work on the second half of the duology. That's right, Persona 2 is the only game to have 2 mainline games attached to it. Crazy, huh? Persona 3 is technically Persona 2. The story of Innocent Sin ends off on a crazy cliffhanger that wouldn't be answered until the sequel Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. Since the game uses the exact same engine and most of the same assets, the turnover time for this game was like fast as lightning. Interestingly, this second half of the duology was localized outside of Japan, which is weird because without the first half of that story, there's a lot of context lost that you kind of need, but hey, it is what it is, I guess. This localization wasn't too great either, but nowhere near as bad as Revelations Persona. Since this game is damn near identical to Innocent Sin in every way besides the story, this will probably be the shortest section of the video. The game continues right off from where Innocent Sin ends, with Maya Amano taking the lead spot over Tatsuya Suwo in this chapter. There's also a new cast of characters alongside her. We have Katsuya Suo, who is Tatsuya's detective brother, Kaoru Saga, better known as Baofu, who's an extortionist with a secret past, and Urara Serizawa, Maya's friend who has no luck with men. The fifth character is the player's choice between Nanjo and Ellie from Persona 1, which is really cool since depending on which route you take, it'll change the dungeon and path you take in the story. It doesn't change the ending or anything, but it does add some good replay value for those interested in seeing more of those characters. Maybe this is a hot take, but I think the story of Eternal Punishment is the best in the series, I'll be honest. It's hard to explain exactly why without spoilers, but it was everything I loved from Innocent Sin and more. It had a heartwarming message, good pacing, and even better character development. Part of this is the fact that the whole cast are adults rather than being high schoolers, which isn't me saying that inherently makes it better, but as an adult, it's something I can relate to more nowadays. By the end of its first year of being on the market, it had sold 200,103 units in Japan, and as you can probably notice, the sales numbers have been consistently going lower and lower. This wasn't just the case with Persona, but across all of Atlus. They were in a real bad spot in the early 2000s financially, and it wasn't necessarily because they were making bad games, but more so that there was nothing to grip in new players to their series. The diehard fans stuck around for anything they made, but that alone wasn't going to be enough to dig them out of the bad spot they were in. They needed something fresh and bold to revitalize their games, so after a 6-year hiatus from making anything for the Persona series, they decided to put everything on the line with Persona 3. Completely new gameplay mechanics, story structure. I mean, there are a lot of differences between Persona 3 and the previous games. So many changes, in fact, that it would be hard to detail everything in this one video, but we'll of course go over the most important things. Regarding the development of Persona 3, it began right after SMT3 and Digital Devil Saga, around 2003. Pressure was high in every aspect during this time, since the entire company was relying on this game's success. They also didn't want to disappoint longtime fans with the new direction or character choices. But you can't please everyone, that's the name of the game. During this time, the main artist for the series was changed from Kazuma Kaneko to Shigenori Sojima. It was a ballsy decision, since Sojima was still a little green during this time, but needless to say, he knocked it out of the park. The Persona 3 characters and Persona designs were perfect. The designs and overall presentation of the game were described as being from a fantastical manga, which makes sense. The entire dev cycle of this game can be described as ballsy, just that's the most accurate way to describe it all. The most ballsy change of all though was the decision to include AI controlled party members. In the other Persona games, you always had full control of your party and their actions, but in the words of the director Katsura Hashino, there are a lot of RPGs out there where you can control every aspect of your party members, including what kind of underwear they are wearing. But because we wanted the player to relate to the hero more than any other character in Persona 3, we wanted the other characters to feel like other people, which resulted in taking control of the party away from the player. Instead, you lead them in battle through the tactics menu. This feature is something that's controversial to this day, with some fans singing its praises, but an equal amount criticizing it in various ways. I've always leaned toward not liking it, but I wouldn't go as far to say it's objectively bad or anything. I suppose it's a bit of an acquired taste, one that I never acquired, I guess. The dungeon design was also completely different since you only had one real dungeon, that being Tartarus. Tartarus is a randomly generated labyrinth with hundreds of floors, and every so often you have a mini-boss or guardian to fight to keep things fresh. This is probably the most divisive dungeon in the series, because if you like Persona 3's gameplay, you probably enjoy Tartarus to some degree. But if you didn't, honestly that's a killing blow for the game. You probably just don't like the game at that point. The story of Persona 3 takes place in yet another setting, this one being Tatsumi Port Island, based mostly off the real-life Odaiba, Japan. The main cast attend Gekukan High School, which is a pretty prestigious school, but it also plays an important role in the story as well. The game revolves around death, apathy, and depression, and how to deal with these things and grow with them. Since this game has about double the amount of cast, I'm not going to give too much explanation on them, but we do have the protagonist Makoto Yuki, Yukari Takeba, Junpei Yori, Akihiko Sanada, Mitsuru Kirijo, Fuka Yamagishi the goat, Kodomaru the dog, Aigis, Kinemata, and Shinjiro Aragaki. All of them contribute to the overall narrative in their own way, that way being much different than the games that came before it. The objective of the group is to exterminate shadows and end the Dark Hour, a hidden hour at midnight, so the group is aptly titled the Specialized Extracurricular Execution Squad. Almost slipped up on my words there, good lord, or C's for short. Persona 3's game time is basically double that of what the previous games were, so they take a lot more time fleshing the story and characters out, and this is in part due to the new calendar system and social link mechanics. Persona 3 is a lot less linear than the older games, meaning you can choose what to do on any given day a lot more freely. You can choose to talk to a social link, raise your social stats, whatever it might be, which means every single choice and day counts. The social link mechanic is by far the most famous of any of the new additions to the Persona series, and it all started here. You have about 21 social links in each game, each having 10 ranks, and the goal is to max out as many of them as you can. Persona 3 and onward really hammer in that whole idea that the power of friendship and bonds are your true strength. So that alongside the Arcana system having a more prominent role, the way the narrative is told is just nothing like the old games. As you'd imagine, this was a controversial decision, but in the end, the game saw critical acclaim from fans and critics alike. In its first week in Japan, it sold 127,472 copies, which is very respectable, but honestly not as crazy as you might expect. This is of course when a certain tradition for Atlus begins though, that really got them an infinite money glitch. The dreaded re-releases. Hey dude, I'm just here to pick up Persona 3. Oh, Persona 3? That releases in like a couple months, man. What do you mean? It said it's out already. Oh, you mean the original Persona 3. You see, there's a new version coming out called Persona 3 Fest, which is basically the exact same game, except it costs the same and there's a little bit more content. So why the hell didn't they just wait to release it with all the content?
I like money.
You know what? Good enough reason. I'm sold. Just 1 year after the release of Persona 3, Atlus released Persona 3 Fest. Fest is an expanded version of Persona 3 with some new features, quality of life enhancements, and of course the new chapter of the story, The Answer. There were some cool things added to the main story as well, but The Answer was definitely the main focus. For a long time, The Answer was actually pretty controversial, not just because of its story, but because of the gameplay. The gameplay loop of the new dungeon was more akin to the old Persona games, except debatably worse since there wasn't much story to break up the gameplay. It was basically 20 hours of grinding in Tartarus with a few story moments here and there. And while I do actually like The Answer a lot of people do not like it. In recent times, it's seen a lot more praise though. I will say it was cool playing as Aigis in this chapter of the game. Honestly, that's about all I gotta say for Fest. It's essentially the exact same game, just upgraded with new content. Kind of a scam low-key, and it wouldn't be the last we saw of this monetization method. 1 year after Persona 3 Fest came Persona 4. As you can notice, they were pumping out games during the late 2000s since they took the hype train of Persona 3 and ran with it to save the company. Development of the game didn't start until Persona 3 was released, so from start to finish, this game took a little less than a year to be completed, which is absolutely insane. Persona 3 is largely accredited to be the main saving grace of Atlus, but you could argue Persona 4 fit that role better. This game is basically a high quality mod of Persona 3, using the same engine and code in a way that makes it a bit hard to notice. Unlike the old Sona games, which I'll call Persona 1 through Persona 2 for the rest of this video, Persona 4 has close to nothing to do with Persona 3 itself. It's a totally detached setting, new story and themes, and none of the previous party members make an appearance. I attribute Persona 4 in many ways to truly showing what the mainline Persona games would look like from that point onward. At the time, it was hard to tell if the sequels would have involvement with the previous games, since the social sim aspects made it so different, and this game gave us the answer. Until that was flipped on its head in a direct sequel, but hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. The story of Persona 4 focuses on the themes of truth through various means, such as self-discovery and acceptance. Every Persona game has this as an overarching theme, but this game focuses entirely on that aspect. It's interesting because the main narrative they chose to push these themes is that of a murder mystery, where the main cast try to catch a killer in the small town of Inaba. This is damn sure the happiest murder mystery I have ever seen, which gives the game a unique identity that I haven't really seen before. Since this is so similar to Persona 3, the social sim aspects are basically the same as well. You gotta raise your social stats, talk to your social links, all the while managing the deadlines imposed for the main dungeons and stories themselves. Some criticize the game for having pacing issues since you're looking for a murderer while doing all the side stuff, but just as many gave praise for these aspects as well. The main cast of this installment are the protagonists Yu Narukami, Yosuke Hanamura, Chie Satonaka, Teddy, Yukiko Amagi, Kanji Tatsumi, Risei Kujikawa, and finally Naoto Shirogane. The cast of this game are very strong. While I think individually the characters of Persona 3 were better written, in terms of being a group, the cast of Persona 4 meshed together a lot better. Since the group were trying to solve the murder mystery of Inaba, they named themselves the Investigation Team. Go figure. Just like Persona 3, the game of course has supernatural elements to it as well, outside of the absurdity of Personas just existing in general. The supernatural aspect of this title is the Midnight Channel and TV world. The Midnight Channel is a program that plays at midnight on a rainy day, which supposedly shows who your next soulmate is. It's quickly discovered that it's actually showing the next murder victims, however, which leads the investigation team to explore the world inside the TV to save the victims and get closer to the truth. The dungeon design and gameplay structure, while being almost identical to Persona 3, actually I think it is identical, like it uses the exact same mechanics and everything. They just played nothing alike for one sole reason: controllable party members. Persona 3 was the first and only game to have AI controlled party members, and while it is an option in Persona 4 in the games that came after, most people opt for the direct commands feature. That in conjunction with the dungeons being way shorter, you don't spend much time in actual combat. You can finish each dungeon in about an hour if you know what you're doing. This has always been my biggest complaint about Persona 4. The dungeons in combat, while not being bad, feel like they end before you can truly get into it. I'm not saying Tartarus was objectively better or anything, but more so that I wish Persona 4 put more focus into the dungeon exploration. It has the weakest dungeons in the entire series in my opinion, but other than that, I don't have much bad to say about it. Persona 4 was received very well by fans and critics alike. In its first week in Japan, it sold 193,000 copies, and it was the highest selling game on Amazon in North America for weeks. It saw much more success than even Persona 3, which is why I argue that this is the game that truly put Atlus back on the map. But of course, you gotta give Persona 3 its flowers in this regard as well. Now we enter a bit of a different point of the series' history: the PSP remakes. Across 2009 all the way to 2012, there were PSP versions made of all the older games, and the one that started off was of course Persona 1. Going beyond even the Persona series, the PSP in Japan was just very successful, and even worldwide, it was doing great. It was going hand to hand with Nintendo handhelds. That was unheard of at the time. Handhelds have always been a strong point in the Japanese market, and the Nintendo Switch exemplifies this point. It's on track to be the best-selling console ever. Since Persona 3 and 4 had brought in so many new fans, Atlus wanted to give new fans an easier way to play the older games, so the PSP was the best way to do that in their eyes. Wish they still had that same mindset today. Where the hell are the ports, Atlus? Yeah, that's not happening, is it? The game is mostly the same as the PS1 version. The big changes lie in the UI and music. It was changed to be more minimalistic and in line with the newer games at the time, which some didn't like as much, but I personally liked it. The most notable thing about this game, in my opinion anyways, is actually the localization. No longer would overseas fans be stuck with the absolutely abhorrent Revelations Persona localization. This version's localization is much more in line with the original script, and it might be one of the best translations they've ever done. I mean, there's not really anything wrong with it. On top of that, every version would now have access to the Snow Queen quest route of the game. So this game was debatably more important for the overseas fans than the Japanese fans. The game ended up selling well enough to give Atlus an incentive to continue the same trend with the other Persona games. So surely Persona 2 is up next, right? Well, I'll be damned. In the same year, Atlus also released Persona 3 Portable, a portable version of Persona 3. Shocking, I know. Could you tell they really wanted to monetize Persona 3 as much as humanly possible? This game had a lot more changes from the base game in comparison to Persona PSP, which was mostly the same. The social sim and story aspects were changed to be a complete visual novel style. No rendered environments, wow, my accent is, I'm gonna punch myself in the face. No rendered environments there, fella. No rendered environments, Character models, nothing like that. You get the portraits, text box, that's about it. It also didn't include the answer part of the story. To make up for that fact comes the biggest inclusion to Portable, the female protagonist route, canon name being Kotone Shiomi. She changes the story slightly, has new social links, and is probably the biggest reason anyone would choose to play Portable over the other versions. The other reason being the inclusion of controllable party members. Portable up until 2024 was the only official way to play Persona 3 with this mechanic, so that was actually a pretty enticing feature. Portable was actually very well received. In fact, it outsold Persona 3 itself, which goes to show how popular the series had gotten and how powerful the PSP was market-wise. This is why Atlus from this point onward, when talking about or mentioning Persona 3, would use the portable version instead of the FES counterpart. This probably played a role in Atlus deciding to port Portable to modern systems over FES, but we'll talk more about all that later. Surprisingly, for the first time since 2006, Persona went an entire year without a new game being released. 2010 saw no new game releases besides the localization for Portable, so we come to 2011. This was the year the next PSP remake was released, Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Similarly to Persona 1, this was very important for the overseas fan base, more so than the Japanese player base. This was the one and only game to never get localized outside of Japan. Technically, so this was a big deal. Players outside of Japan could finally experience the game without resorting to fan translations. Since Persona 1 on PSP did so well, this game had a higher budget, and as a result had some new additions coming from the PS1 version, like some extra quests or content. But for the most part, it was the same game. The same old Innocent Sin everyone loved. And then they gave this guy glasses. Why? Jokes aside, this was Atlus's attempt to get past the ratings board, since, having him in the game was one of the reasons it was never localized in the first place. And it worked. That was all they had to do. It almost seems like a Superman skit, just throw some glasses on and nobody can tell who you are. But that's actually what happened. Crazy. Obviously, the actual reason this worked is because the ratings board was a lot less strict than it was in 1999. This probably wouldn't have worked back then. More importantly, there was only one more game needed for all the old Sona games to be playable on the PSP, Eternal Punishment. So surely this one was the same case as Innocent Sin and Persona 1 and Persona 3 Portable, right? Improved localization, improved gameplay, all that, surely, right? Well, shit. So yeah, this game never got released outside of Japan due to quote-unquote unusual circumstances, which who the hell knows what that means. Persona 2 had an odd fate in general overseas. We didn't get Innocent Sin PS1, but we got Eternal Punishment PS1, but then we got Innocent Sin PSP, but not Eternal Punishment PSP. What the hell? Eternal Punishment PSP to this day is the only Persona game to never be localized outside of Japan. This really sucks because unlike Innocent Sin, Eternal Punishment PSP added an entire new chapter to the story that is canon, the Tatsuya scenario. Since Maya is the protagonist of this game and Tatsuya is off doing his own thing for the majority of the game, this scenario serves to fill in those gaps. It's a bit divisive in the community as far as I'm aware, but since barely anybody played it, who the hell knows really. I found it to be an enjoyable experience, and it added some of my favorite songs in the entire Persona franchise. This was the final mainline game I ever finished in the series, so I have a bit of a sweet spot for the PSP version of the game specifically. It has debatably my favorite story in the series, some of my favorite music, and it fixed most of the issues I had with Innocent Sin's gameplay structure, like performing actions taking forever is no longer a problem. It's a great game, and hopefully one day they'll remaster it and localize it properly. 2012 was a huge year for Persona, with 3 games in total being released during this time. The game that came after Eternal Punishment PSP was Persona 4 Arena. This game was very important for the Persona series, because up to this point you'll notice there haven't been any spin-offs, right? Well, that's because this was the first one. Atlus nowadays is known for churning out spin-offs like their life depends on it, but that wasn't the case up until now. Not only would this game act as a direct sequel to Persona 4, but it would be in a completely new game style. A fighting game developed by Arc System Works, the biggest anime fighting game developer of all time debatably. The cherry on top? This game would bring together the Persona 3 and 4 casts in a canon storyline. So yeah, remember what I said during the Persona 4 section, about the games being detached from each other for the most part? This is the big outlier. It's still a Persona 4 game at its core, focusing on the main themes, but with support from the Persona 3 cast. This game is important to the story for many reasons, but above all else, it was just a cool game to see, The game was simple for beginners to get into, but it had enough depth to keep people who enjoyed more technical fighters to give it a shot as well. Features like auto combo are things Arc says would adopt into their games going forward after seeing how successful the mechanic was. Really, a lot of what Arena did would be the progenitor for other fighting games that came after. In terms of the story, since this is a Persona game after all, I think it's a bit better than people give it credit for. Sure, some characters like Akihiko are a bit questionable, but other than that, I think it's a strong narrative. Labrys is absolutely amazing, Elizabeth had a great storyline, and overall it had tons of fan service for longtime fans of Persona 3 and 4. I do understand why some people aren't a fan of it, but I loved it, I'm not gonna lie. The hype for this game was gigantic, and this is where the meme of Persona 4 never dying really caught traction, cause yeah, they put a lot of focus into Persona 4 to say the least. When the game dropped, it sold very well, outselling other fighting games at the time such as Street Fighter Cross Tekken and Skullgirls. Upon seeing the success of Arena, ArcSys and Atlus quickly got to work on a sequel to the game, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, but hold on, we can't talk about that just yet. 2012 had one more release up its sleeve. Persona 4 Golden was the actual big release of 2012. A new re-release of Persona 4 with new content specifically for the PlayStation Vita, the evolution of the PlayStation Portable. This game was everything people loved from Persona 4 and more. Mostly. It featured a new character named Marie, a new dungeon, a new ending, and tons of quality of life features. This game is renowned as being one of the greatest games ever made, receiving an even higher score than Persona 4 itself by critics. The game was actually planned to be released on the PSP instead of the Vita at a certain point of development, which would have meant the visual novel style of Persona 3 Portable would have been applied to Persona 4, but with the Vita on the horizon, development shifted to that handheld instead. And thank God it did. While I am a fan of Persona 3 Portable, Persona 4 Golden is a much better experience. Not to mention the fact that playing a fully fleshed out 3D Persona game on the go is the coolest shit ever. My first time experiencing this game actually was on the Vita, and I went on to play it again, and again, and again. Yeah, I was basically obsessed with this game. Playing it and 100% completing it in languages I didn't even understand just to play it again. I loved it that much. Now, there were some questionable changes to say the least with Golden, namely in the atmosphere and visual presentation. It doesn't take a genius to see the difference between these two games stylistically. Does that mean Golden is bad or inferior? Hell no, at least in my opinion. While I do prefer the presentation of the PS2 version for sure, it's not even a contest, I'd never go as far to say Golden is bad. Then there's the new character named Marie, who to this day is divisive in the community. Some love her, some hate her, but regardless, she is there and that's just how it is. Quality of life features included being able to leave the Dojima residence at night, skill inheritance, costumes, a new city, new music, the garden, and a small networking feature that would allow you to interact with other players, albeit in a very insignificant way. These things make the game so much more fun to play, so even though I do prefer the PS2 version in many ways, I always opt to play Golden instead. Something important to note here is that the PlayStation Vita was a total failure in terms of commercial sales, but this game single-handedly kept the Vita alive for years. I'm serious, it was always at the top of the PSN sales charts, and it was one of the more expensive Vita games to get for the longest time because people wanted it that much. Hell, I think even the prices of the Vita itself were affected by this game's legacy. It's insane! As soon as the game was ported to Steam, the prices started going down. I have never seen this happen with another game or console in my entire life, so I had to mention that because that just blows my mind to this day. Persona 4 Golden is just a GOAT, I guess. By this point, you'd probably imagine that they finally had their share of Persona 4, right? Like we're, time to move on to something else, The sequel to Persona 4 Arena, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, was released on home consoles in 2014. The arcade versions came out a little bit earlier in 2013, but I'm not going to focus on that version. This was essentially Arena, but bigger and better. More characters, more stages, more moves, more everything. And of course, it continued the story of Arena. I don't have too much to say about this game other than the fact that the gameplay is so much better than the base Arena, but in terms of story, I do like base Arena more. The main antagonist of this one is Sho Minazuki, and I've been very transparent that I do not like this character whatsoever. He has great gameplay, but I cannot stand him. I don't like his story, I just don't. Then there's the whole story of Atlas and Arxis abandoning the game, but that's a bit out of the scope of this video. If you're interested in hearing more about that though, you can check out my video going over the whole ordeal at the top right of the screen now, or you can check the description. This next game, I'm not gonna lie, I know almost nothing about because it's by far the game I've played the least in the series. Persona Q. After seeing the success of Persona 4 Arena, Atlas wanted to do another spin-off involving both of the casts, this time using a more traditional RPG style game loop inspired by Etrian Odyssey. The Q in the title comes from the Japanese name of the series, Sakaiju no Mekyu, which is a cute little nod. This was also the first ever Persona game to be released on a Nintendo platform, so that's actually a pretty important factor. The story of PQ takes place in two separate time periods since there's a bunch of weird time shenanigans going on. For the P3 side, it takes place around the Culture Festival, and for P4, it takes place during the School Festival. Obviously, these are several years apart in universe, but of course, for the sake of having all the cast present, they gotta do what they gotta do. New characters like Rei and Zen make an appearance, but I know nothing about them, dude. I really don't know nothing about this game, I'm not gonna lie. I did enjoy the dungeon crawling though. I even enjoyed drawing the map, which seems to be a point of contention with this game. Since it's on the 3DS, it makes you use the stylus and second screen to draw the map manually as you traverse the dungeons, which is a fun, interactive way to give the game a different feel than the traditional Persona games. It's a good example of using the hardware-specific strengths of a console to make a game play differently. But I will say, I'm not sure how this would play out in a secondary playthrough because I've only played this game through once. So yeah, maybe it won't age well in separate playthroughs, I don't know. There's nothing particularly wrong with the game itself, I just couldn't get into it. When it comes to these alternate universe type games where everyone forgets everything once the game is over, my immersion in the story becomes non-existent. The gameplay is good and the story is fine, but it's just not for me. The game sold well enough to see a sequel in the coming years, so this wouldn't be the last we saw of the Persona Q spin-offs. But of course, Atlas, we're finally done with the Persona 4 side of things and we can move on to greener pastures. Yeah, no, I lied. Persona 4 Dancing, baby, woo! This has got to be one of the most out-of-nowhere games in the series. But to be honest, when you think about how important the music is to Persona as a franchise, it makes sense that a rhythm game was made for it. The craziest part of this game to me is how it's actually canon to the Persona 4 timeline. Like, canonically, the investigation team had to break it down sick nasty style in order to save the lives of others. It's insane in all the best ways. This was once again a PlayStation Vita exclusive for a while until being ported to PlayStation 4 a few years later, which served to breathe some more life into the handheld, however small that might be. The story of Dancing takes place about a month after Persona 4 Golden, revolving around Rise Kuchikawa and the idol industry. One of Rise's rivals, Kanami of Kanamin Kitchen, mysteriously went missing, which leads them down yet another rabbit hole. They gotta go find some missing people. In order to progress closer to the truth, they have to dance to defeat shadows. I'm dead serious. When I was playing this game, I could not believe what was happening, but it was so off the wall that I couldn't help but enjoy myself. Despite how absurd the story is, it's actually pretty good. I won't spoil anything of course, but Kanami and her group were cool characters that I grew to like. Since this is a rhythm game above all else though, that's what you'll be doing the majority of the time you play the game. Almost all songs were remixed specifically for this game, and I like most of them. There are some absolute dog shit songs like this. Yeah, this one is infamously dog shit, but there are plenty of other songs to make up for it. Each investigation team member has a set of songs to dance to, and if you perform well in the songs, you can see duet dances as well. This game is just a good time to play. It almost makes you forget that you're most likely playing this in a dark room, alone. But then you remember that these are the small pleasures needed in life, my friend, and you should not feel bad about enjoying yourself. Before we go into the next game, I just want to share some numbers real quick. Let's go over how many major releases each Persona entry has had up to 2015. So Persona 1 has 2 major releases, Persona 2 has 4, Persona 3 has 3. Any guesses on Persona 4? God damn. Even Persona 2, which is a literal duology with 2 remakes under its belt, still couldn't beat out Persona 4 despite being several years older. Insane. So surely it was time to move on to another mainline title, right? Remember, Persona 4 Vanilla came out in 2008. It's now 2016. What game came out this year? Well, this wasn't just any old game. This game changed not only the direction of the Persona series as we know it, but it caused a whole gaming phenomenon, a staple of gaming and pop culture. Persona 5. The impact of this game cannot be understated. The amount of people that got exposed to the series through this game was through the roof. Almost any gaming channel on YouTube you saw was doing a playthrough or review of it. The game saw glowing reviews from critics and fans alike. The music is used and referenced all over the place. It was a natural evolution of everything people loved about Persona and more. A new bold presentation and aesthetic, higher stakes, themes of rebellion. It was unlike anything we've seen up to this point. Detailing how massive this game was in scale is a tall task, but I'll certainly do my best. Development of this game was rough. They developed a new engine, got more staff, but more importantly, there were just a lot of ups and downs during development. For a while, they couldn't pin down what they wanted the game to be. The story, gameplay, graphics, general mechanics, everything went through several different drafts. This resulted in several delays in builds, but once everything was said and done, they had something truly special on their hands. The story of Persona 5 follows the protagonist, Joker, in his journey to break free from a false criminal charge that put his life on the wrong path. You might be wondering why I mentioned more about Joker himself than the other protagonists, and that's because his unique fate is intertwined deeply with the game. The game in general focuses on the Japanese society and government, and the apparent faults of it. The characters of Persona 5 exemplify the themes of freedom, making your own decisions, and fighting for what you believe in. It's also meant to emphasize the feeling of not belonging in society, which I'm sure is something a lot of people can relate to. The cast of Persona 5 include the protagonist Joker, otherwise known as Rin Amamiya, Ryuji Sakamoto, Anta Kamiki, Morgana, Yusuke Kitagawa, Makoto Nijima, Futaba Sakura, Hado Okumura, and Goro Akechi. While this isn't my favorite cast of the Persona series, it's damn sure a good one. As with the previous 2 mainline games, the Persona 5 cast also had a name attributed to their group, the Phantom Thieves of Hearts. The Phantom Thieves' goal is much different than that of Cease or the investigation team. Their objective is to change the hearts of bad people and take back society with their own hands. Their means of doing this is through the newly introduced metaverse, an alternate reality that shows the true nature inside of people. Depending on how distorted their cognition and desires are, they'll have an entire dungeon based on their misdeeds. These are called palaces. The Phantom Thieves infiltrate these palaces to change the hearts of their next target. The main setting of the game is Shibuya, Tokyo. Fitting considering what the game is going for. Unlike the previous games though, there were a good number of places you could visit outside of the main location. Akihabara, Shinjuku, Yogenjaya, so on and so forth. While these aren't massive areas or anything, it certainly had more depth to it than the previous games, which made it more fun to explore. The gameplay of course was improved upon greatly coming from Persona 4 as well. It wasn't a complete overhaul or anything, but the skill animations and new dark and light skills made it more interesting to play. That alongside the dungeons being much more interesting in my opinion, it made the game a lot more fun. While the game does have mementos, which is a glorified Tartarus gameplay wise, the palaces are fully fleshed out dungeons with unique mechanics and enemies spread across them. No palace you enter will look the same as another. The Castle of Lust looks nothing like the Museum of Vanity as an example, which helps keep the game feel fresh. Of course, in between the main story and dungeon crawling, the social sim aspects make a return as well. These are the things that are eternal across Persona 3, 4, and 5. Gotta raise some social stats, spend time with your social links. Wait, editor, what the hell is a confidant?
The fuck do you mean, ask the editor? We're the same person, dumbass. You already know the answer.
Oh. Social links in Persona 5 are called confidants. They function almost the exact same, the only differences are the naming convention and you actually get abilities from your confidants. The confidants in this game are great. I mean, we got a teacher getting blackmailed, a Yakuza member with family issues, a kid with family issues, a shogi player with family issues. Is there anyone without family issues? Of course, the maid, right? Wait, what do you mean the maid is the teacher?
Yes, it's me. It's your homeroom teacher, and I'm in a maid outfit.
That's what I'm talking about!
Something kind of big that I don't see mentioned about Persona 5 is that it brought back a lot of mechanics from the old Sona games. Negotiations and guns are the big things, since these are mechanics you'll use throughout the entire game. Negotiations more so than guns though, since this is how you acquire new personas. In Persona 3 and 4, you could only get new personas through shuffle time and fusion, but since this game doesn't have shuffle time, they replaced that with negotiations. It has less depth than the original negotiation systems, but that isn't a bad thing in this context, trust me. I bring this up just to reiterate the point that this game tried to take everything people loved about all the Persona games and put it into one, and if you ask me, they knocked it out of the park. While this isn't my favorite Persona game out of the mainline titles, it still holds a special place in my heart. I'll never forget booting this game up, getting to the first hideout on a rainy day, and just basking in the atmosphere. I could talk about this game all day, but there are more titles to go over, so unfortunately we'll have to end it there. So how about some more Persona 5, guys? Atlus wasted zero time getting to work on more Persona 5 related spin-offs after the game took off into the stratosphere. In 2018, we saw 2 Persona 5 spin-offs in the same year, Persona Q2 and Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight. Since Dancing released a little bit earlier, we'll talk about this one first. So how about the remixes, am I right? I mean, Persona 4 Dancing had pretty good remixes. They're shit.
Yes. And I've got to make my decision. Yeah. This time it could be my moment.
Okay!
I'm sorry, but I just don't like the remixes they made for this game at all. It sounds like something the gym would play when you forget to bring your headphones, and since this is a rhythm game, yeah. The game plays the exact same as Persona 4 Dancing, so really the only thing I have to mention is the fact that this game does not have a story mode. Instead, it has social events that you unlock by playing the game. Each character has 8 events, and upon completing them, you unlock more costumes or accessories to put onto the Phantom Thieves as they dance. There's a lot of good fan service here, so even though I don't like the remixes, the social events made the game a fun experience regardless. I mean, how could I possibly live without knowing my girl Haru is horrible with computers? That's vital information required for her character arc to function. During Futaba's Hangout event, she tries to fix a computer and contact the outside world, since they're kind of in a state of limbo during the events of the game. A place between dream and reality, if you will. She does get in contact with someone, but who exactly? Is that the GOAT? Fuka, I never thought I'd see you again. I thought Atlus abandoned you. How have you been?
Ha! Fucking virgin!
Oh. Well, Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight was released in a dual pack alongside Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight. And this is literally identical to Persona 5 Dancing in terms of how it's structured. No story, it has hangout events, and you dance to remix songs from Persona 3. The main difference here is that the songs are actually good, so that makes it a better game. Other than that, I have nothing to say about it. It's just a rhythm game. Well, we've gone far too long without talking about Persona 5, so let's get back to that, shall we? Persona Q2. Yeah, I know actually nothing about this game. Anything beyond like the first hour or so, I'm aloof. The only thing I know for real is... No, not this shit again, Sam. I had enough of you in the DMC3 video. Get out of here. The only thing I know is that all the cast from P3 through P5 appear, including the female protagonist from Portable. And Kamoshida is here again, why? Once again, the Q games are basically a means to have tons of fan service with the characters interacting, so in that regard, it serves its purpose well. Gameplay seems about the same, maybe slightly better. Really grasping for straws on what to talk about here, so let's just go to something different. Another Persona 5 title! This ain't just any Persona title though. At this point, it's probably the Persona title. Persona 5 Royal. Another re-release though, damn it! Basically, Royal is an enhanced version of Persona 5 itself. New dungeon mechanics, personas, skills, and a new chapter of the story is included. The two major characters of this re-release are Kasumi Yoshizawa and Takato Maruki, both being very good characters if you ask me. I can't go into much without spoiling something, but all I'll say is that the third semester content that was added into Royal is some of my favorite writing in all of Persona. It's almost like a total callback to the themes of Persona 1, which I loved. The thing that's kind of wild about this game is how long it is. With that new content added, this game can take upwards of 130 hours to beat casually. It's an absolute unit of a game, so if you ever want something that'll truly give you your bang for your buck, then Royal is the girl you want to take to the dance for sure. In the span of just 3 years, Persona 5 was already rivaling most games in the series with how many entries it received. And of course, the train wasn't going to stop there. The game released in 2020 was the direct sequel to Persona 5. Not Persona 5 Royal though technically, because I don't know, the timeline is weird at this point. This game was Persona 5 Strikers. I'm trying to think of jokes to say, but I don't have any more jokes about there being more Persona 5 games. The jokes write themselves at this point. The game started development after the release of Persona 5 in 2016. Not to be confused with Persona 5 Royal again, let's just, I don't know, man. This game is meant to be a blend of Dynasty Warriors and Persona. This game is unique from the other spin-offs in the fact that this functions very similarly to a mainline Persona title. There are set dungeons and arcs and a calendar system. The only thing that sets it apart is the actual social sim aspects like confidants aren't present, and the game of course uses Dynasty Warriors gameplay. Since there aren't any confidants, the game is more linear in how the calendar system works, which in some ways I actually kinda like. It's nice to play a Persona game that has normal dungeons and arcs without the traditional gameplay system. Does that mean I want every Persona game to be like that? Hell no, but it is a nice change of pace for sure. The game takes place about half a year after Persona 5, and the gang plan to spend the summer vacation together on a camping trip. But of course that doesn't work out because literally nothing works out in these games. Instead, they end up in a metaverse-like realm, but instead of there being palaces, there are now jails as they're called. And this girl, like, she's this dominatrix, she made me feel, you know what, I better not continue that sentence, so I'm just not going to. You end up traveling across Japan to try to figure out where the hell the jails are coming from and why they came to be, since, you know, the metaverse should theoretically be gone by this point. It's actually a pretty good story overall. I do have my gripes with it, but nothing that would lead me to say it's a bad game. The gameplay is, as I've said I don't know how many times at this point, a Dynasty Warriors-esque game. I won't lie, I've always seen this game as just being a button mash simulator. Really no depth, but tons of flashy effects to try and keep you engaged. I think most people will like it, and I think most people do like it. But if you're like me and prefer something with more technical gameplay like Persona 4 Arena, or a better comparison would be like Devil May Cry 3, you're just not going to see that in this game. Does that mean it's bad? No, but it does mean you got to set your expectations accordingly when you go into the game. Overall, it's a good game, and there's a reason it's most people's favorite spin-off in the series. I just don't have any strong feelings or opinions to make a really long segment about it. If y'all would like to see me revisit this game in another video though, definitely let me know in the comments below. 2020 was a very interesting year, as I'm sure y'all know. Things around the world happened, and those things put a big ass stop sign on everything. Games, music, shows, work, everything came to a screeching halt. Why do I mention this in a Persona video? Well, due to the conditions, Persona went on its longest stretch ever without a game in this time. Persona 5 Strikers came out in 2020, and we wouldn't see another Persona game until 2023. What was it? Was it Persona 6? Oh god. The Persona 5 burnout was in full effect by this point, guys. I mean, I love this game. This is actually my favorite spin-off story in the series. But by this point, we were just looking for something else. Luckily, Atlas has an ace up their sleeves. What was that ace? Well, something that wasn't Persona 5. Oh my god, guys, this isn't a drill. Evacuate the building immediately. Well, we do still have to talk about Tactica. Like I said, I do really love this game, all jokes aside. It takes place around like December or January, somewhere around there. And what do you know, the Phantom Thieves are in more trouble. While the gang is chilling in Leblon, a sudden earthquake happens and they end up in another world. Wouldn't be the first time, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. In this world, you meet someone named Erina who saves you, and she's forming a revolution against the deities of this world. Like I said, this is one of my favorite spin-offs in the series for sure. While the gameplay is quite simple, being in the tactics genre this time around, it was fun in its own right. But that story, oh my god, that was so goated. If I'm remembering correctly, I liked this game so much at the time that it was the first Persona game I went out of my way to do a review for here on the channel. And let's just say the channel has come a long way since then.
Yo, what up homies? Yandere Gogeta here, and today I wanted to talk about the most recent entry in the Persona family, and that's of course Persona 5 Tactica.
Oh god. Unfortunately, there's only so much I can say about these smaller spin-offs without going into spoilers, but again, if you want to see me revisit these games in a dedicated video, definitely drop a comment. I'll be sure to take all feedback into consideration. While I might not be able to talk about the spin-offs much, this next title I certainly can. Persona 3 Reload. But damn is it green. That was kind of the whole meme with this game. It was so green you'd think it's Persona 3 Kiwami or Persona 6 itself. But I kind of vibed with how the game looked. The game started development around the launch of Persona 5 Royal, so it was in the oven for about 5 years. Of course, the whole thing in 2020 probably had a hand in it taking so long, but hey, what can you do? Reload was a pretty big step for Atlus because it was their first large-scale remake, they were using a third-party engine, and the development team itself was ever-changing. Since Persona 3 is so important to the series, bridging the gap between the old Sona and quote-unquote modern Sona titles, they really wanted to get this one right so more people could experience it for the first time or experience it once again with a new fresh coat of paint. The question here is, did they accomplish their ultimate goal? Well, it depends on who you ask, but if you want my opinion, which I hope you do, that's the entire point of the fucking video, I think they nailed it. Some argue that the older versions of the game like Fest or even Portable are better, but for me, at this point, I'm choosing Reload over Fest at this point. It's everything I loved about Persona 3 but improved upon. Of course, there were some changes made with the script, but overall, I thought it was good. More fun gameplay, the male party members actually have a social link equivalent in the male route, the antagonists of the game were more fleshed out, the cutscenes are amazing, I just love the game to bits. It's kind of weird though, because with Persona 4, I do find myself enjoying the PS2 version more than Golden in a lot of ways, but it's never been the same story with Persona 3 Fest and Reload. Maybe one day I'll give Fest another shot and see how it goes, since my taste in games has changed a lot since I played it last. None of my issues with the game had to do with the story or anything, just the gameplay. Like I said before, if you don't gel with the AI-controlled party members, then Tartarus is a slog. It's still kind of a slog here, but they did add some new stuff to make it a bit more lively, which is basically the gist of my feelings with the game in general. Some things I didn't like from Fest are still present and I still don't really like them, but they're not as bad to me. Overall, it's a great game and there's a reason it was their fastest selling game for a little while there. Until it was beaten by their own game that same year. Damn, Atlus was on a roll, and it looked exactly like the Persona 3 protagonist in that new game. But of course, we couldn't stray away from Persona 5 for too long now, could we? I mean, it's been far too long since we talked about Persona 5. So let's continue. Wait, where the hell is the game? Oh yeah, I don't have this game installed anymore. Oh well, guess I'll just use old footage then. Persona 5 The Phantom X is a gacha game developed by Black Wings Game Studio, a game studio based in China, so Atlus themselves don't have much involvement in this game beyond the main story. It takes place in an alternate universe where the Phantom Thieves we all know and love either don't exist or never became Phantom Thieves, so we're greeted with a fresh set of thieves. Wonder, Araimotoha, Shunkano, Luffy, Riko Tanemura, and a certain someone I won't mention for spoiler sakes. I've made my feelings on this game very clear in previous videos, and I don't plan on doing any more content for this game going forward. Despite whatever agendas people had in their heads between me and this game, I really do not hate it. I just don't like gacha games, period. They are objectively designed to be predatory and get the player to spend money on microtransactions. It's akin to gambling, and I'm just not going to give the game a pass for it anymore. I don't want to turn this video into a hate-filled rant though, so I'm just not going to talk about it anymore. I probably won't mention this game ever again unless it's for a video like this. If you enjoy the game, that is perfectly okay. I have no problems with it and I encourage everyone to give it a try, but I ain't playing it no more. That brings us to our final game, Persona 4 Revival. Believe it or not, ladies and gents, and anything in between, I know nothing about this game. Crazy, I know, but what I do know is that Yu Narakami is in it and it takes place in Inaba. Wild stuff, truly. I mean, look at that walk animation, just wow, it's beautiful. It's almost enough to make a grown man cry. Well, you know what they say, Persona 4 will never die. Even when you think Persona 5 is the new baby, Persona 4 is always peeking its head in the shadows. You can never escape Persona 4. Remember that, folks. Well, this video is probably like, what, well over an hour by this point, so no need to yap your ears off about a game that hardly exists, so let's give some closing remarks, shall we? Persona, out of any franchise I've seen or played, has a damn near perfect blend of both quality and quantity. Even when they're dropping upwards of 3 games in 1 year like they did in 2012, the games were still great. Arena is my favorite spin-off and Golden is my favorite game overall, and they dropped within months of each other. On top of that, Persona 2 Eternal Punishment PSP dropped that same year as well, and that has my favorite story and some of my favorite side content. How the hell Atlus has managed to pull this off, I have no idea, but with a track record this impressive, I have high hopes for both Persona 4 Revival and Persona 6 if I ever live to see that come out. More importantly though, I hope you enjoyed joining me on this long journey of looking back at the history of the series. The evolution and history of the games over time is really interesting once you lay it all out, and I found it to be an interesting experience for sure. The only thing I'll say before I conclude the video is that I have now opened up a Patreon and Ko-Fi if you all want to support me more directly. I wanted to wait till the time was right to do this, and I think now is that time. On the Patreon, I'll be providing various rewards, like early access to videos, updates on videos, high quality variants of all of my thumbnails, and for the highest tier, I will record a personal response to a question you ask me. So check that out with the link in the description if you're interested. If you don't want to pay monthly for Patreon or just don't really care for the rewards, then Ko-Fi is also an option. You can do a one-time payment of any amount to support me as you please, so check that out as well. That's about all I gotta say though. If you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and a sub. It helps the channel out a lot, and I'll give you a free cookie as always. Here you go, homie. It's been your boy Yandere Gogeta, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out, everybody, and have a great day.